and it is associated with abnormal bone mineralization. That is an extremely important finding, and it suggests that magnesium supplementation may be more important than calcium in preventing this condition. Other research deals with the effect of the trace mineral manganese. How many of you remember the famous basketball player Bill Walton? Okay, I guess he wasn't that famous. Okay, more people. Okay, wake up. Thank you. All right, most of you remember him. He was good. He played for UCLA. He was before, I think after Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And he was in the NBA, and he was very good. He was on the All-Star team. But he started breaking his bones all the time. He had at least 6 fractures, and they didn't heal fast. He was on a macrobiotic diet, which may have been deficient in some trace minerals. But there was also a family history. His aunt had some problems with her trace mineral metabolism, too. But when they checked to find out why he was not healing, they found out that this vibrant, healthy, powerful 7-footer had osteoporosis in his 20s. And then they started looking at some biochemical changes. The level of manganese in his bloodstream was below the detection limit. They couldn't find any manganese. And later on they checked his family members, and they couldn't find any there either. So there was some hereditary component. Possibly he had low stomach acid, possibly his macrobiotic diet was deficient. But the bottom line is he was low in manganese, low in zinc, and low in copper. And each of those nutrients in animal studies is important for normal bone density. Well, they supplemented him with these nutrients, and within 6 weeks he was back playing in the NBA, and the rest of that season he played more games than he had in the previous 2 years combined, and went on to have the rest of his career was uneventful in terms of fractures. So what this brings up is the point that all of the vitamins and minerals have a chance of playing a role in bone health. The research so far indicates a role for vitamin B6, vitamin C, folic acid, zinc, copper, manganese, magnesium, one called boron, which up until a few years ago was not even thought to be an essential nutrient in mammals. But recently they've shown evidence that it keeps the hormone levels from falling at menopause. So we like to use a couple milligrams of boron in a multiple vitamin and mineral supplement. In addition, there's evidence that hormones are involved. Many of us have been told to take estrogen at menopause so we don't get osteoporosis. And this is the standard therapy right now. Take calcium, take estrogen, do some exercise, pray that you don't get breast cancer from the estrogen. And there is some evidence that it might cause that. If you have a uterus, then you have a 3- or 4-fold increased risk of getting uterine cancer, so you've got to take Provera along with it. And then you can pray that the Provera won't make you sick. It's got a lot of side effects, Provera. Anyway, there appears to be a better way of doing it. And the reason I say appears is because the research is only highly suggestive at this point. And I personally didn't have the courage to recommend this alternative approach until I wrote this book and reviewed all the literature and said, this makes a lot of sense and I really should be doing this with my patients. And since having done this, I'm seeing very good results. The bottom line here is that the ovaries make 4 hormones. How many of you knew that the ovaries make 4 hormones? Most of the time we think of estrogen as an ovarian hormone. Menopause equals estrogen deficiency. Some people knew that the ovaries make progesterone too, but very few people, including doctors, are aware that the ovaries also make DHEA and testosterone. Well, when you get to menopause and the ovaries become weaker, why is it that we just think of replacing one? Hormone replacement therapy should be very similar to what the body was doing and is no longer doing. Now, that's not how the endocrinologists look at it. Whereas we take, for example, thyroid hormone and replace the whole gland, which contains at least 3 known active substances, the endocrinologist says, well, all you got to do is use Synthroid or thyroxine because the other 2 don't do anything, or they're not necessary. And to which I respond, how do you know? How do you know that? And they say, well, it's known. And then when the ovaries lose their strength, why don't we put back a little bit of everything? It really makes a lot of sense. I mean, you don't have to be a scientist to have common sense, and I suppose sometimes being a scientist, or at least going through the cult of modern medical educational training sometimes takes away your common sense. How many of you knew that medical education was a cult? 1. Okay. Sort of like the Branch Davidians or Jonestown, things like that. How do you get somebody to change their reality? You get them to snap. There's three things that you do. It's brainwashing, right? How do you brainwash somebody? Number one, you keep them awake all night, right? That's called on call. That's called studying for these exams with 3,000 facts. Okay, keep them awake all night. Number two, feed them erratically with non-nourishing food. Okay, that's number two. And the third thing, coffee, right? Coffee, fear, and donuts, as we say. The third thing that you do is bombard them incessantly with information. This is the way you get somebody to snap and change their reality and take on the reality of the aggressor, which in this case is the medical profession. You know, I was abused in my training, so I'm going to abuse you now that I'm a professor. That kind of thing. Well, anyway, people develop this reality, and when you come by and say, it's really a lot easier than that, it just sort of flies by your head. Someone reacts to that as if being physically attacked. That's why in the study in the New England Journal, when they said a third of the people in this country seek alternative medicine, and out of that group, 2/3 of them do not tell their doctor that they went. And then the doctor says, well, there's no evidence that any of this is true, which brings up this whole thing, you know, you hear what you need to hear, you hear what you're willing to hear. There was an issue about whether near-death experiences really occur. And this doctor got up at this grand rounds and said, I work in an intensive care unit, and I've seen plenty of patients who could have had a near-death experience, and not once has anybody ever related a near-death experience to me. After which someone in the back of the room raised their hand and said, Doctor, I was in your expensive care unit, or is it intensive care unit, and I had a near-death experience, and you're the last person I would have told. Which is a problem, because the very people who are spending our money and giving us side effects and not offering us these safe and effective treatments, who need to hear this, are not capable of hearing it, and we as patients are afraid to tell them. And I always suggest to people, please write the doctor a letter. Next time you see this doctor, tell him or her that this is what you did and these are the results. And very often they say, I can't do that, he'd get mad at me. So we're dealing with a reality check problem here. Anyway, I got off the subject. Let me just review what we're looking at menopause. We're looking at supplementing with DHEA and progesterone. Progesterone is available as a skin cream. It's sold in the health food stores, actually. And the research by John Lee from Sebastopol, California, shows that of postmenopausal women who have osteoporosis, nearly all of them have an increase in their bone density and stop having vertebral crush fractures when they start rubbing this Progest skin cream on their skin. There's new evidence that DHEA, also a bone-building hormone from the ovaries, may help reverse or at least prevent osteoporosis as well. Now, if we can get away without using estrogen, we do so. It's important to note that both DHEA and natural progesterone, and I'm not talking about Provera. Provera is not progesterone, it's a progestogen or progestin. And this is an oversight in the medical community. Most doctors say progesterone when they mean Provera. It is not the same thing, it does not have the same effects, and it does not have the same negative effects. So be real careful about when somebody says they want you on progesterone. Is this a natural progesterone? Is it the same thing that the ovary makes? And most of the time they're used interchangeably. So both progesterone and DHEA have a small trickle-down effect into estrogen. You will make a small amount of estrogen from each of these other hormones. What I find sometimes, about half the time, is if a woman comes in with hot flashes or other symptoms of menopause, we can control those without using estrogen. What I've done is measure the DHEA level in the bloodstream, and if it's on the low end, I'll use between 3 and 10 milligrams supplemented in capsule form every day, and I'll use the progesterone cream, and about half the time the hot flashes or the vaginal dryness or depression will improve without getting into estrogen. If they do need estrogen, I go by Jonathan's recommendation using a product called triestrogen, which contains 3 estrogenic compounds similar to what the ovaries makes, and a lot less likely to promote any cancer risk. There is evidence that one component of this triestrogen, called estriol, actually inhibits the development of cancer. And if you use the triestrogen formula, you invented that, right? Yeah. Jonathan pulls these things. I think he's channeled. Are you channeled or are you just very wise? He's channeled. Okay. He came up with more treatments that work than anybody I've ever known. But anyway, he developed this formula called triestrogen, which is probably a lot safer based on its having estriol in it. So if I do need to give somebody estrogen, I'll use this formula, which is 10% estrone, 10% estradiol, and 80% estriol. Now, this is not commercially available. It's not like Premarin, which comes from the urine of pregnant horses. That's why they call it Premarin, pregnant mare's urine. You've heard that before? This is true. This one is funny, but it's not a joke. That's where Premarin comes from. Triestrogen is similar to the natural ovarian secretions, and it can be compounded by a pharmacist. They're called compounding pharmacists or apothecaries, which is the way it used to be before everything got put in a package and sold for an exorbitant price. There are a bunch of compounding pharmacists around, but you've got to find a doctor that's willing to make this prescription. So based on the evidence, we're using a comprehensive multiple vitamin and mineral program. We're using the naturally occurring hormones. And so far, of the people that we've had a chance to repeat their bone densities, many of them have had either an increase in their bone density, which according to the book is not possible. Well, my book says it's possible, but the real book says it's not. We are seeing some reverses in bone density, and we're not seeing side effects. So clearly there's a lot more research that needs to be done in this area, but we're talking about a condition that costs $6 billion a year in medical care, osteoporosis. We're talking about more than 1 million fractures that occur per year, primarily in women. And then there's this thing that they call the little old lady syndrome, where people keep getting shorter and shorter because their vertebrae keep crushing spontaneously, and people get all hunched over and short, and it's very painful. And then the hip may break, and someone ends up in a nursing home from that. So this is not something that has to happen automatically. I suggest that you find a physician who is interested in this. We'll give you a couple suggestions right now on how to find a physician like that. I'm involved in the American Holistic Medical Association. You can write away for a referral directory, which includes about 200 and some physicians, not all of whom are interested in this. Some of them are interested more in the spiritual or the emotional aspects of health. Some of them are interested in nutrients and hormones. But you can write away for a referral directory, and it tells you what each doctor is interested in and where they are. And you need to send $8, which includes $2 for shipping, so 6 plus 2. Send it to AHMA, which stands for American Holistic Medical Association. The address is 4101 Lake Boone, as in Daniel Boone, Trail. And that's suite number 201, and that's Raleigh, North Carolina. Raleigh, North Carolina. And then there's the American College of Advancement in Medicine, called ACAM, which has been mentioned several times today. Do you have the address or phone number?
The College of Advancement in Medicine started by a number of doctors who do chelation therapy, so they picked a unique phone number, 1-800-LEAD-OUT, L-E-A-D-O-U-T, and just spell it out on the telephone dial, 1-800-LEAD-OUT. That's a referral service to members of the American College of Advancement in Medicine. Most of those docs are very interested in the biochemistry of medicine, certainly in all the holistic aspects, a little bit less in the spiritual and psychological, mostly the biochemical.
Actually, I would have done 1-800-PLUMBER. P-L-U-M-B-E-R. You know, the Latin word for lead is plumbum, and you know, the plumbers come in and the term is for dealing with lead pipes, right? That's where the term came from. So, okay, I wanted to mention a couple other things and then give it back to Jonathan. Coenzyme Q10 has been in the news a lot, partly because the FDA keeps busting it. It's real interesting. The things that the FDA bust are the substances which have the greatest healing potential and the least side effects, and that people are the most interested in. In Japan, coenzyme Q10 is the third largest selling substance there. I believe it's a prescription drug there, but it's almost completely non-toxic. In a recent study of several thousand heart patients, only 0.4% had side effects. those consisting of nausea and rash, which are mild side effects, 0.4% of the people, which is very safe for something as powerful as this. Coenzyme Q10 is a component of what we call the electron transport chain, which is involved in the production of energy in the body. And since energy is required for all biochemical processes, without coenzyme Q10, the body falls apart. Now, the first things that go are the ones that require the most energy. Since the heart beats 70 to 80 times a minute, that's probably the most metabolically active area of our body. And heart disease is one of the things that occurs when coenzyme Q10 deficiency is present. Also, the gums, the gingival tissue, is a rapidly dividing, rapidly metabolizing area. How many of you, when you cut your gums, find that like the next day it's almost healed? That's what happens because the gums are so rapidly metabolizing that things turn over very quickly. So gum tissue tends to break down with coenzyme Q10 deficiency. And the third area that's rapidly working is the immune system. It's always going down and doing search and destroys and fighting bacteria and fighting allergies and fighting viruses. And what we find is that these are the three areas of bodily function that respond to coenzyme Q10. There have been some studies on patients with cardiomyopathy. That term means cardio meaning heart, myo meaning muscle, pathy meaning disease. Cardiomyopathy is a disease of the heart muscle, and there are many different causes, but one of the effects is that coenzyme Q10 leaks from the body, leaks from the heart. And they've done actual biopsies on heart muscles. I don't know how they got people to agree to that one. But they did a biopsy of the heart muscle in people that had cardiomyopathy, and the level of coenzyme Q10 was low. They supplemented them with coenzyme Q10, repeated the biopsy, and the levels came up to normal. In clinical trials, they have shown that people with end-stage cardiomyopathy, shortness of breath at rest, that's a pretty bad situation, life expectancy 1 to 2 years, were not only most of them alive 5 or 6 years later, but their functional classification improved. They have this thing called the New York Heart Association classification. And if someone had shortness of breath at rest, they improved to shortness of breath after minimal exertion. If they were shortness of breath after minimal exertion, they improved to shortness of breath after moderate exertion. So they lived a lot longer, their quality of life improved, and there were no side effects, with 100 milligrams per day of coenzyme Q10 in addition to standard therapy. This has now been confirmed in a double-blind study where half of the people received coenzyme Q10, half the people got placebo. This is published in a recent journal called Clinical Investigation. And nobody's seen that one yet. We hear about these things because we're sort of in the pipeline. People send us articles all the time. But that's out there now. And what is the alternative treatment for cardiomyopathy? Anybody know? Heart transplant. So that's alternative medicine, heart transplant. Heart transplants cost about $300,000, and then you got to be on anti-rejection drugs, which cost about $30,000 to $50,000 per year. Now, coenzyme Q10 is not one of the most expensive, it's one of the more expensive nutrients, but still, you're looking at a bottle of 60 capsules, 30 milligrams a capsule, run you about $18 to $20. So compared to these expensive other treatments, it's a bargain. Of course, insurance won't pay for it, so that changes the equation a little bit. Hopefully that will change. My feelings about insurance are that we probably shouldn't have any at all except for catastrophic coverage and let people choose their own care. But I don't want to get into politics because we'll probably get into some fight here. Well, if you've got bad gums, periodontal disease, take 30 to 60 milligrams of coenzyme Q10 per day for 2 months and it frequently will heal. If you've got AIDS, and this has been studied in a medical journal, they took 7 people with AIDS who were getting all the opportunistic infections, and their coenzyme Q10 levels were very, very low. They gave them 200 milligrams a day, and their T-cell counts came up, and they had far fewer opportunistic infections. Small study, of course. One of the reasons they're not doing large studies is because you can't get the drug companies interested in studying this, because these are non-patentable substances. So, but coenzyme Q10 does help people with immune system compromise, and if somebody wants to prevent heart disease, 30 milligrams a day is a good idea. If you've got mild congestive heart failure, 30 to 60 milligrams a day is often very helpful. If you are unfortunate enough to have cancer and are being advised to take the chemotherapy drug Adriamycin, which is known to cause irreversible cardiac damage as a side effect or an effect, you can take coenzyme Q10, 100 milligrams per day, and you can almost completely block the cardiac toxicity of Adriamycin. This is a life-saving thing, and it was published in a book called Biomedical and Clinical Aspects of Coenzyme Q10. 8 years ago this was published. To this day, I don't know any oncologists who are prescribing CoQ for their Adriamycin patients, and I will again give you my humble opinion that any physician who prescribes coenzyme Q10 Adriamycin without coenzyme Q10 is guilty of malpractice. I've tried to discuss this with oncologists, and they don't seem to be real interested because it's not published in a medical journal. It's published in a book. And, you know, you'd think that they'd want to save people's hearts, but doctors are so scared of being looked at sideways by their colleagues. You know, we go through, I've talked about this before, we go through this training, but there's also this thing about standardization. If you're not with us, you're against us, and not only are we supposed to know everything, which is emotional abuse, we're supposed to be God too, which is spiritual abuse. And we come out of this, and somebody tells us something we haven't heard, and it's not possible that that could be because we know everything. So there's really some emotional level on which this is blocked, and perhaps we can figure out some way of changing this. It is not about science anymore. I know someone once said that you don't change people's minds, you just change their behavior through economic demise or military defeat. But I don't know that we can do the military defeat with the medical community. I think the economic demise is occurring, and that what is now alternative medicine, as Bob Dylan said, the first one now will later be last. You know that one. We are in a position now to offer affordable medical care, much of which is self-care. And for 20 years we've been yapping about this, and people are listening a lot more today than they were before, even though nothing's changed chemically. What has changed is financially. And for the first time we can show very clearly that this kind of medical care will save hundreds of billions of dollars. And this is the way we have to go as a nation. And I guess we'll just keep yapping until it changes, and then we'll retire, okay?
All right. A little bit more about osteoporosis. It's in Alan's book, but I thought perhaps we'd put it on the tapes and talk about it a little bit. Diet is very, very basic. Alan mentioned most of the supplements, but there are studies that show that one can take a whole lot of calcium and other minerals, and if one is eating the wrong diet, it doesn't do near the good that it should. A couple of examples. For one, schools of public health, not medical schools, have shown a long time ago that women who, for nearly their entire lives, are on a strictly vegetarian diet, as compared with women who are on a so-called omnivorous diet, have as much as 35% greater bone mass when they get to be in their 70s. It really does make a difference. In studying the various components of that diet, some of them have been isolated that are good for us and bad for us. The higher the amount of animal protein, the more the calcium loss. A lot of the effect of diet on calcium in the bones has to do more with the retention of calcium in the body than with actually what's going in. For example, Dr. Herta Spencer rounded up a number of folks, had them all take 2,000 milligrams of calcium a day. That's quite a little bit. And those who were on a diet high in animal protein urinated back out 2,000 milligrams of calcium a day. 2,000 in, 2,000 out, no net gain. On the other hand, the folks that she had who were eating diets low in animal protein retained some of that calcium. They urinated less calcium back out than went in. What I ask folks to do is to stick with a diet that has a majority, not an entirety, just a majority of fruits and vegetables, and a minority of animal proteins and grains, even whole grains. Grains? Yes, it turns out that another component of diet which gets our bodies to kick out calcium happens to be the phosphorus component. You've heard of calcium-phosphorus balance. The more phosphorus goes in, the more calcium comes out. Grains are higher in phosphorus than they are in calcium. So if we put in a lot of grain, we actually have a net loss of calcium. Animal protein generally is higher in phosphorus than it is in calcium. If you take a look at a table of components of food and which foods are highest in calcium and which are lowest, turns out that towards the top of the list with the calcium, lots of calcium, animal proteins, grains, and way down here at the bottom are green veggies. But on the other hand, if you redo the table with foods which cause the body to retain the most calcium, funny thing, those green veggies, which are at the bottom of the list for calcium content, go right up to the top because they have virtually no phosphorus in them, so that the balance there is very, very good. With respect to the amount of phosphorus in those green veggies, there's a lot of calcium. With respect to the amount of phosphorus in animal protein or whole grains, there's actually less calcium than phosphorus. And then there's some other unnatural dietary components that cause our bodies to lose calcium too. Any phosphorus-containing soft drink, and most of them do, processed foods contain a lot of phosphorus. The more processing, the more phosphorus is one of the general rules. And sugar, in a substantial proportion of the population, sugar goes in, calcium gets urinated out. So one of the strategies for holding onto our bone mass is actually how much calcium can we retain, not just how much do we put in. And again, the basic diet needs to be, and here we go again, sugar-free, junk-free, low on stuff that's processed, or no processed food would be better, to keep that phosphorus out, and higher in the vegetables and fruits than in the grains and animal proteins. Again, nobody's saying no animal proteins. Nobody's saying become an instant vegetarian, please, if you want to keep your bones. Nope. Just keep the animal protein at a minority in the diet, and also the grains. Well, that's the diet part. Say a little bit more about the hormone part, just a little bit more. As Alan pointed out, mostly it's been the pharmaceutical companies who have been very successful at convincing us that certain things are what they aren't. For example, a lot of people will say, I take estrogen. And I'll say, are you a horse? As Alan said. You know, how many folks here today have never taken Premarin who are female? Never mind us guys. Okay, good, a good number. But there's also a good number who have taken Premarin, and none of you have 4 legs and a tail. And yet, the pharmaceutical companies have convinced us that Premarin is estrogen. It isn't. It's horse estrogen. People estrogen is, as Alan said, a combination of estrone, estradiol, and estriol. And there is fairly good evidence out there that estriol itself is anti-carcinogenic, prevents cancers. In fact, in a footnote to an AMA journal article, no less, which was published in 1978, in that footnote, it mentioned some research work done by an oncologist, a cancer specialist at the University of Nebraska Medical School, working with women who had breast cancer that had gone to the bones, so-called metastatic breast cancer. It had gone to the bones. It was inoperable. That's that. There's nothing they could do. This oncologist asked these women to take estriol. And according to this footnote, 40% of the women with metastatic breast cancer to bone had their breast cancer metastatic to bone disappear with simply estriol. Isn't that interesting? How come we can't get that treatment? Well, it isn't patentable. That's the big thing. You can't patent a hormone that's identical to what's found in nature. Well, seriously, if estrogen itself is all that dangerous, how come all the women in this group didn't drop dead of cancer by the time they were 30? Weren't the ovaries pumping out estrogen? Sure they were. But ovaries pump out estrone, which is slightly procarcinogenic. They make estradiol, which is slightly procarcinogenic. But ovaries make also it's not just ovaries, other tissues in the body, I should say, take these hormones and promptly turn them into estriol. So if you do a blood test on somebody, and that somebody has the usual pattern of estrogens, and is female, the estriol is always at a higher level than the other two estrogens. Nature has this balance. We have more of the anti-carcinogenic estrogen in our bodies than we have the pro-carcinogenic. So I'm a little more aggressive with the estrogen, and here I'm talking about estrogen, not Premarin. When someone is after the menopause and they says, yes, my grandma was 3 inches shorter when she was 80 than when she was 20, and my aunt had that trouble too, and it just sort of runs in my family, or the women in my family get heart attacks, or I don't like these hot flashes, I'll say, here's a prescription for estrogen that is totally identical to human estrogen. And as Linus Pauling pointed out, if we use molecules that are exactly identical to the molecules that are found in our systems, we're least likely to get into trouble. If we extend that to, say, molecules that are not only the same in size and shape, but also in proportions, a majority of estriol, a minority of estrone and estradiol. So the next thing that comes up was, well, if those molecules are exactly identical, where'd they come from? Anyway, didn't come from people, did they? That wouldn't be exactly ethical. Well, nope, they come from yams. It turns out that the Diascorea yam, which grows in Mexico, manufactures a fairly large number of steroid molecules within it. Now, most of those are not identical to estrone, estriol, and estradiol, but if you happen to be a biochemist, you can do the equivalent of what we all do with our hedges. Namely, trim a little bit here, trim a little bit there, trim a little bit there, and what do you know? We have a molecule that's exactly identical to the human molecule. So it's not mostly synthesized up out of petrochemicals. It's instead trimmed right on down from the large molecule found in the yam. So if it's molecularly identical, then it's least likely to cause problems, and in fact, it appears it's anti-carcinogenic type of estrogen. There are a lot of folks who've read the so-called longevity magazines and read that, well, gee, if we keep these hormones at a higher level for longer in our lives, our tissues will break down less rapidly. Could that be true? Yeah, it probably is. And if we use the estrogens that are exactly identical to the estrogens found in the human system, it's likely an anti-aging hormone. In fact, it is an anti-aging hormone, never mind likely. Now, they are exactly identical molecules. For those of you who are into auras and spirituality, I suspect that these molecules have the aura of a yam. I'm sorry. Because I don't think the biochemists have been able to alter the aura around the molecule. So, okay, there's nothing we can do about that part, but at least if we can keep it anti-carcinogenic, we're doing well. Okay, another molecule that we have heard of in Longevity Magazine and other places that write on those subjects is called DHEA. You've heard of that one? You heard Alan talking about it. Dehydroepiandrosterone. Now that one is made mostly in the adrenal glands. It's a hormone that's at a very, very low level when we're small children. It comes out in both men and women in almost equivalent amounts, 90% in women as much as in men. At the time of puberty, rises to a peak at roughly age 25 or so, maybe 25 to 30, and then gradually declines. That's the history of this particular hormone. It gradually declines. It's like a long, slow, steady menopause instead of an abrupt one in both sexes. Real briefly, because they gave us a signal here, this particular hormone has been found to be anti-carcinogenic. It helps to prevent cancers, and that isn't just maybe, it does prevent cancers. If we had more time, we'd go into the molecular mechanisms of how that works, but it does prevent cancers. In studies of women who have breast cancer, with an equal number of women who don't of the same age, the DHEA level is almost always much lower in the women with breast cancer. There's one exception, one unusual type of breast cancer, but all others it's almost always lower. In men with prostate cancer, the DHEA level is about half of what it is in men of the same age, and I won't say men of the same sex, I almost did, who don't have prostate cancer. It's very, very definitely an anti-cancer hormone. One of the things I find at the clinic over and over again, if someone comes in and says, I'm getting to be worried about cancer here. I'm 10 years from the age when mom got cancer, or dad got cancer, and my grandparents had cancer, and so forth. If there's a family history of cancer, I'll run the level of DHEA or ask the people to get it done, and quite frequently it's lower than it should be. It's a hormone that can be supplemented if we use it in molecules that are exactly identical to the natural molecule. It can be done with safety. It's not only, though, an anti-cancer hormone, it happens to be, at least in all the experimental animals tried, a longevity hormone. If you round up a group of animals, split them in two, half the animals get animal chow and the other half get animal chow with DHEA in it, as a group, the animals get the animal chow with DHEA, outlive the other animals by roughly 20%. Now, sure, any one of them could get run down by a truck, but if we're doing averages, about a 20% longer life in the group with DHEA, and also somewhat healthier. The hormone is anti-carcinogenic, it's anti-aging, and it also helps to boost a failing immune system. All of us, as we get older, the immune system gets a bit weaker. DHEA boosts up that immune system. It's a very important hormone. You can work with it if you want to, since it's on prescription, through a doctor who's a member of this College Advancement in Medicine. Remember the 1-800-LED-OUT telephone number? Or some of the doctors in the Holistic Medical Association. Or you can go to a free country such as Italy and buy it over the counter. Well, that's true. You can buy a lot of things in free countries such as Italy and Taiwan and Singapore and Mexico that you cannot buy here.
I'd just like to make a couple additions on DHEA. We're sort of running out. It's very useful for autoimmune conditions, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, chronic fatigue syndrome. There's now a double-blind study on treating multiple sclerosis and a double-blind study on lupus. Probably the most commonly useful medical treatment is people that are falling apart. That's not a diagnosis. People that are getting old and falling apart. Somebody comes in 70 years old when the DHEA level drops and they're losing body weight, getting weak, getting tremulous, losing their appetite, getting a little senile, just falling apart. There's no code for that in the book, falling apart, but we have to make up a medical term. You measure their DHEA level, it's usually below normal or at the bottom of normal. What I've given is a mere 5 or 10 milligrams a day, which is on the lower end of what people are prescribing, and they come back after a month, more energy, muscle mass is back, memory's better, all this stuff. It's like reverses the last 10 years. You start getting younger. And as soon as I get to that age, I'm measuring my DHEA level. But I think that just in the animal studies, it may reverse some of the manifestations of aging.
DHEA, like any other hormone, can be overdone. It really is important to work with a doctor who knows what things to measure so you make sure you don't take too much also. Got about 6 minutes.
Okay. All right, the last thing we wanted to go over, and we will have time for questions tomorrow. There are sessions where you rotate through one at a time, 4 groups, and there'll be 20 minutes with each group to ask questions and have them answered. The last thing that we wanted to talk to today is about ginkgo biloba extract. As many of you know, the ginkgo biloba tree is the oldest tree on Earth, 200 million years old. And those of you who believe in nature as a metaphor would not be surprised with the observation that the leaves of the ginkgo tree have anti-aging principles in them, since it's the oldest tree on Earth. Anyway, they've discovered these compounds which improve blood flow and improve the metabolism of the brain and other tissues in the body. There is more research on ginkgo in the past 10 years probably than any other plant extract. And what they've shown is it's got some anti-aging activity. People who are having some of the same problems that I just mentioned, fatigue, depression, loss of weight, loss of appetite, loss of balance, ringing in the ears, organic impotence, which is distinguished from psychological impotence. There are a bunch of studies which show that all of these conditions have been reversed by using ginkgo biloba extract. We just call it ginkgo. And the ginkgo extract, if it says on the bottle standardized extract containing 24% of this long-term ginkgo heterosides, just look for the word extract and 24% and you've got the right product. And it's widely available. Any health food store should have that. So if you're going to the doctor and the doctor says you're getting old and I can't make you any younger, and what you're really thinking is I just want you to make me older, what you can really do is just go get some ginkgo and you probably feel a lot better. I've used this in a large proportion of people over the age of 60, but particularly when somebody gets to be 70. DHEA and ginkgo really do a lot. In younger people, there's one study with chronic ringing in the ears, also known as tinnitus, and ginkgo is supposed to help. The dosage of these treatments is almost always 1 capsule 3 times a day. In my experience, out of a half a dozen or so people that take ginkgo for ringing in the ears, half of them have gotten better, the other half didn't. And ginkgo can also be used in some cases for improving hearing, anything that's related to aging. There's a condition called intermittent claudication, where the circulation in the legs deteriorates. It's due to impaired blood flow. One study from Europe says that ginkgo supplements allow people to walk farther before they get pain. Another study from England says that if you take ginkgo, the visual deterioration due to macular degeneration gets better. So there's little or no problem with ginkgo. Some people complain of a stomach ache or diarrhea or a headache, but in general, easily more than 90% of people that take ginkgo have no side effects from it. It's not terribly expensive, and it's something that people can do to help them with their age-related conditions. So would you like to, Jonathan would like to talk about the FDA.
Yeah. Chip said that I could go ahead and not talk about nutrition for about 10 minutes. Have a little introduction to this section too, if I can get it to work. As one of our employees pointed out, it sure does break up your average clinic day to have somebody kick in the front door, come running in with guns, and arrest your B vitamins. But that is what happened. Actually, it's afforded us a lot of opportunities. We got to make this tape. Now, actually, that tape was made as part of a fundraising effort. The fun and games up at our clinic, I think it came from an excess of testosterone. That's one of the theories. Occurred 6th of May, 1992. The legal fees engendered by this whole thing have gotten close to $200,000, would you believe? And nobody's even filed any charges. No kidding. It's not gotten anywhere near a courtroom. They're still having a secret grand jury investigation of whatever it was that they raided our clinic for. And no charges have been filed. They refuse to talk to the press. They say, This is a secret investigation. We can't tell you anything. So how come $200,000 in legal fees? Well, it turns out that if you have a grand juries just have loads of fun issuing subpoenas. We have about 23 different employees at the clinic. I guess we're all different, but we have 23 employees. And about 11 of them at one time or another have been subpoenaed to go testify in front of this grand jury. Well, you may know that grand juries investigate criminal matters. They're investigating actually a criminal conspiracy, the nearest we can tell. I asked my attorney, well, what's going on here with a criminal conspiracy over B vitamins? Because when they first raided the clinic and we read the search warrant they presented, if we hadn't been all so excited and thrilled by facing the guns, we would have fallen over laughing because they were there to arrest our vitamin B12. That's what the search warrant said. And our B complex and our folic acid and some gland extracts and some botanical extracts and some equipment that's used for screening people for allergies and sensitivities that works on the same principle as a biofeedback machine or a lie detector machine. No more dangerous than that, and that's what they were there to do. Now, since that time, they put out reports in the press that they went and raided that clinic because they were manufacturing drugs. But in their search warrant and their affidavit to the judge to support that, they didn't say a word about manufacturing drugs. They were after our B vitamins. So this other has been a smokescreen they've thrown up. Well, anyway, B vitamins and gland extracts and so forth, well, my attorney told me that was all misdemeanor stuff. Like traffic tickets? So I asked him, well, how can you have a grand jury doing a felony investigation if this is misdemeanors? And he said, oh, don't you know that game? I said, what game? I've been doing this medical thing over here, and that's illegal. Attorney said, you know, if you have two people standing on the side of a road and the light's green and they both cross the road, that's a misdemeanor jaywalking. But if one of them says to the other, light's green, let's cross the road, and the other one says, yeah, let's go for it, that's a felony conspiracy to commit the misdemeanor of jaywalking. I'm not kidding. Ask any attorney out there. That's a felony conspiracy to commit the misdemeanor of jaywalking. And so they've been getting our employees in before this grand jury to try to implicate them in a conspiracy with me for illegal possession of B vitamins. Well, none of the employees want to be involved in a felony conspiracy, so they all go in and, just like we all see on TV, say, I take the fifth. And the attorneys try to tell them, well, look, FDA attorneys, give these guys immunity from prosecution, or I should say persecution. Give them immunity from that, because, look, this is the receptionist, this is the file clerk. They're not involved in any kind of a conspiracy. And so negotiations go back and forth, and about $3,000-$4,000 later, FDA says, no, we're not going to give them immunity. And they go in and say they're not going to testify, because they can't get me in a conspiracy. One person can't conspire with themselves even if they're schizophrenic. Unless they can nab somebody else. So upwards go the legal fees. They go up and up and up, and we're close to $200,000. These tapes have 16 songs on them. There's The FDA is Coming to Town, there's The Ballad of Tryptophan. There are a lot of other songs like that. And if you just happen to be a millionaire and would like to donate a bunch of money to our legal defense fund, or even if you're not a millionaire like me, my wife, who's at the back, has a stack of these little tapes, and you're certainly welcome to a tape with a donation. They're sort of fun, and they're even in stereo and quadraphonic sound and all that. I know it didn't sound like it on here, but they are. Now, this little episode really, though, has had some other aspects besides all the legal investigations and subpoenas and fun and games like that. One time, for example, one of the subpoenas asked us for every single piece of correspondence between our clinic and every single insurance company for every patient who had ever been to our clinic for the last 2 years. I'll repeat that. Every piece of correspondence between our clinic and every insurance company for every person who'd ever come to our clinic for 2 years. We asked the attorney, do we have to comply with that? He says, well, maybe not. I said, good, we'll just wait and see if the judge enforces it. And he says, oh, no, that's not the way the legal game is done. The way it's done is first you get all that material photocopied, then you take it into the judge, and then the judge makes a ruling as to whether it's legal or not. I'm not kidding. It took one employee 10 weeks at 40 hours a week to do that. Speaking of raising the cost of medical care. But there's been more fun things happen than that. My favorite one, I guess, my very favoritist one, happened last October. Remember, that was more than a year after they raided our clinic. In the same building with our clinic is a medical laboratory. They weren't accused of doing anything, but they had the poor sense to be in the same building, I guess, and so they had guys running through the laboratory with their guns, too. That laboratory accepts specimens, blood specimens, urine specimens, all that kind of specimens from all over the United States and Canada. So the supervisor from the laboratory got a telephone call, and the telephone call said, how come you turned down my urine specimen? It was a doctor from Ontario in Canada, not Ontario in California. Supervisor said, well, it took 5 days to get here. And the doctor said, well, I pay for a special courier to get it there. You have courier service in this. 24 hours overnight, it's an important test. Supervisor said, I'm sorry, sir. It took 5 days to get here. We log in everything when it comes in. We have to. He says, I'm getting to the bottom of this. So he called the courier service. Had to work his way up the courier service, got to the head of the courier service who said, oh, well, I'll look into that and get back to you. He got back to him and said, sir, we have been told by Customs Service that FDA has required that every urine specimen and specimen of other sorts sent in from Canada must be delivered to FDA headquarters in Chicago first. And then after FDA is done with it, whatever they were doing with it, then they could mail it on to the laboratory. So here we are a year and some months later, and they're still doing that. So we got together with the laboratory, and they held a sale on stool specimens for all the doctors in Canada. And you know, after a couple weeks, nobody had any trouble with specimen delivery anymore. You can't have fun with a cosmic joke like arresting your B vitamins at gunpoint. There just isn't any point, you know? We expect when we go back into the States to get body searched like my wife did when she was coming back from Taiwan. If you're looking for these tapes, my wife grew up in Taiwan. She was born in China. You can find her at the back. She looks rather Chinese. And she was coming back from Taiwan, and she got stopped by the customs lady, taken into a room, and they searched all her luggage and body searched her. Told her she was listed in the computer as a drug runner by FDA. And I'm listed in there too. Now, as Chip is sneaking up on me, the good part of all of this is it's become just part of an overwhelming movement that all of you have participated in. I'll take this last minute to congratulate all of us with all of the letters and telephone calls and cards that you sent into Congress saying, please get the FDA out of the supplements, pass that Hatch bill, pass that Richardson bill. You probably know that there are 63 co-sponsors in the Senate. There are 230 co-sponsors in the House. And if it weren't for the committee structure in those two legislative bodies, we would already have the FDA out of the vitamin business. So congratulations, a majority of co-sponsors in both houses, but don't give up. We need to keep the pressure on. Now, Congress says they respond more to letters than they do to telephone calls, but that's okay, do both. Call them up. Tell them we want the Dietary Supplement Act from Senator Hatch, from Congressman Richardson. We want those through, but send them letters. They got more letters on those topics last year than they got on any topic since the Vietnam War. Seriously. And that's the kind of pressure we all need to keep on the Congress in the United States. Now remember, when they get all those letters, they can't read them all. You couldn't either. Don't blame the congressional staff if they're getting sacks and sacks of mail. They can't read it. They weigh it. They weigh, here's all the letters in favor of those bills, and here's all the letters against. They just weigh it. So use heavy stationery, people. There is such a thing, just big envelopes, heavy stationery, and if we just keep calling and writing and calling and writing, that will be part of what it takes to get the job done. Now, sure, it's going to take some on-the-scene and behind-the-scenes political pressure besides to get it through Senator Chappaquiddick and through, I think that's his name, and through the congressional chairs. But we should really all congratulate ourselves on the job done last year and do not give up this year. We can get those bills through so that if you want to take some ginkgo without it being classified as a food additive, which FDA has said that they will do in print, we can do it. Thank you very much.
Can you recommend either a nutrition program or some alternative program for help of a severe back problem?
Well, there's so many different causes, but some of the things we look at that often help, cleaning up the diet in general, sugar, caffeine, alcohol, looking for food allergies, which is a fairly common factor in chronic either unexplained back pain or arthritis, taking various vitamins, particularly vitamin C, calcium and magnesium, and last, it's not exactly nutritional, but there's a drug called colchicine, which comes from the autumn crocus plant, so it's sort of like an herb. It's available from Eli Lilly by prescription. It's given intravenously in most cases, and in the case of herniated discs, it's got about a 90% success rate in relieving chronic pain, and I've seen some very dramatic results over the years. People who couldn't move their foot were able to raise it, people with chronic severe pain. So those are the areas that I look, and certainly chiropractic and other areas too.
And then one other area you might have a look at is an area called orthopedic medicine. Now, I didn't say orthopedic surgery. I said orthopedic medicine. There is an American Academy of Orthopedic Medicine. Those doctors use injections of natural substances to torn ligaments that actually help the ligaments to regenerate and repair themselves. That takes care of a lot of pain problems. There's a book out there by Dr. William Farber called Pain, Pain, Go Away. I'm sorry, that's the book title. You might take a look at that. He mentions the orthopedic medicine techniques. It's one of the most neglected areas of pain relief for people who have had injuries in the past and just haven't gotten them better. Again, it's not orthopedic surgery, though. It's orthopedic medicine.
Dr. Gabby, you mentioned yesterday about glucosamine sulfate in regard to cartilage.
Yes.
Can you tell me, our son has a problem with his hip. He's only 34 years old. Is there, would that be a help to him? They said the cartilage is almost gone.
Well, it would probably help some, but we need to find out why it's degenerating at his age. There may be some metabolic condition that needs to be corrected. There also may be some kind of structural abnormality, and he might need to get orthotics or have some other kind of physical work done. In general, at that age, when there's a damage like that, it's more than just the typical wear and tear arthritis.
You said it was probably an injury from about...
Yeah, but yeah, I think glucosamine sulfate's a good thing to try.
And what about the DHEA? Would that help at all?
Not in his case. It would help with lupus, but it probably would not help with the hip condition.
And where can we obtain it?
It's by prescription. You have to find a doctor willing to prescribe it.
Right. Now, in general...
Italy without a prescription. How about Canada?
No, not Canada. Canada, unfortunately, follows the lead of the American Food and Drug Administration way too much. In general, DHEA, and then secondly, testosterone in the natural state, not the artificial synthetic stuff, are extremely helpful with any autoimmune disease, not just lupus.
Over here.
Yes, I came across an article in a bodybuilding magazine that said when DHEA was taken orally, it was broken down 90-95%.
In the intestines, broken down in the intestines?
Yes. And he went on to say there was a way of concentrating it, dissolving in alcohol, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I wish that bodybuilding magazine had done some before and after blood tests like we do at our clinic all the time. What we find is that if the DHEA level is very low and we have people swallow the appropriate dose, it comes up to normal. So I'm not sure where they got their data.
Just send the pictures.
Just send the pictures, yeah.
By the way, it's not a good idea to take anabolic hormones to build your body up. You can end up with some serious problems. We're talking about either treating a chronic serious illness or correcting a deficiency in people that are older. That's the appropriate use of these hormones.
Yeah, with hormones, that's very low, and we have people swallow the appropriate dose, it comes up to normal. So I'm not sure where they got their data.
Just send the pictures.
Just send the pictures, yeah.
By the way, it's not a good idea to take anabolic hormones to build your body up. You can end up with some serious problems. We're talking about either treating a chronic serious illness or correcting a deficiency in people that are older. That's the appropriate use of these hormones.
Yeah, with hormones, that's what we want to limit it to. Now, with the vitamins and minerals, especially the non-toxic ones, sometimes a giant dose will actually have a good effect, even though there's no deficiency there, and it does minimal harm. But with the hormones, not wise to use overdoses of them at all.
Are you familiar with melatonin?
Are we familiar with melatonin? Yes. Okay, would you like to know about it? Melatonin is a hormone from the pineal gland which involves with the circadian rhythm, the light-dark cycle, the sleep-wake cycle, and people who have a phase shift problem with sleeping. In other words, they can't fall asleep till 2 o'clock when they want to fall asleep at 11 p.m. You can take melatonin 90 minutes before your intended sleep time, and it will shift your sleep phase so that you fall asleep at the proper time. Melatonin deficiency is fairly common in people over the age of 60. It's much less common in younger people, so it's more likely to help you at that age if you can't sleep. And it is a hormone, and we don't know a lot about it yet, but it appears to be safe from what we know.
Actually, in people under 40, it's probably a good idea not to use it unless one is checked with a doctor who knows something about the melatonin and knows what they're doing. There are a few studies that say that it might actually be harmful under that age. Over that age, and the further past that age, the more it might be useful. There's other work that says it probably helps to prevent breast cancer, for example, if you're concerned about breast cancer.
Did you say yesterday taking B6 or B12 was beneficial for conditions of bursitis?
That was bursitis, and 2 B6s don't make a B12. Alan told me that one day. It's vitamin B12 by injection. It doesn't work too well when it's swallowed. You can certainly are welcome to try, but very frequently it doesn't work. We have to have people take a vitamin B12 injection every day till the pain goes away, and it usually works. Yes, and that usually doesn't take more than a week or two.
Would B6 be beneficial?
Not for bursitis. Not for bursitis particularly, no.
Thank you.
Would hiatal hernia be treatable the same as stomach ulcer?
Well, hiatal hernia does not automatically cause symptoms. Most people that have hiatal hernias don't even know about it. So the question is, why does the food reflux back up into the esophagus? And one of the reasons is poor digestion, and believe it or not, we do find that taking additional acid with your meals will help prevent the symptoms of hiatal hernia if you have low stomach acid. And in addition, stopping your food allergies and stopping certain irritating foods like sugar, caffeine, and alcohol may help. Stopping smoking may help. And what else helps?
That's about it.
Yes?
What do you know about valley fever? If I get my immune system in order, will I prevent it again?
Right, histoplasmosis. The question was about histoplasmosis, sometimes called San Joaquin Valley fever. it's a fungal type of a problem, or semi-fungal, a fungal spore anyway. There fortunately aren't any drugs which treat it real well, which is good. About the best you can do is clean up your general health and then think about things which in general are antifungal. And I certainly can't tell you there's any studies on them, but if I were working with someone who had that particular fungus in the system, I'd be thinking about systemic antifungal things that are natural, such as oregano oil, tea tree oil, garlic oil, all of those things. Oh, you can take any of those, sure. But there's no studies on that. That's just what I'd be thinking about.
Okay. Yes.
I was wondering, the estrogen type hormones that you talked about yesterday, if you have had breast cancer, would you go ahead and recommend taking those 3 types that you said, 10%, whatever, and then 80%?
The folks I work with who've had breast cancer, I prefer to go with the one that's been shown to be anti-carcinogenic. It's called estriol, and one can get from a compounding pharmacist a capsule that contains 100% estriol. One can also get the other type we were talking about, but I just prefer to be on the safe side at this time because all the studies we need haven't even yet been done. So one can get estriol in capsules. It is an anti-carcinogenic estrogen.
Yeah, well, my leaning on that is not to use estrogen at all unless it's necessary. You can use DHEA and progesterone to prevent osteoporosis, and in some cases, though not all, it does relieve the menopausal symptoms too. So that's where I would start at least.
I haven't heard anyone mention anything about the condition of the colon and all these symptoms, and cleansing it.
Is that a statement or a question?
Well, I want to know your comments on it.
Well, you go to a naturopath, they say your liver's congestion and your colon's toxic, and I say, could you define that for me? And I'm not sure exactly what that means, the state of the colon. I think that what we've been skirting around would, according to naturopathic theory, improve the health of the colon, but it's not something that I have worked with, except there are people that benefit from colonic therapy, and there are people who benefit from what they call detoxification. But I just urge caution in using terms that are hard to explain what you mean.
Did you have any particular diseases or symptoms in mind?
Well, I've just seen so many people helped with doing things like that. I was just
Sure.
thinking it would be good to mention.
It's another general good health measure, such as getting rid of the sugar, getting rid of the caffeine. What do colonics do? If there's any junk in there that needs cleaning out, they clean it out. And that can't be harmful to the health. In Washington State, we have more licensed naturopaths than anywhere in the country. And I also have seen some real good results by people seeing those naturopaths and getting colonics done. So I'll second your motion. It's a general health measure.
Her motion?
Yeah. Well, you want me to second her movement?
In the back, yeah.
There is a theory that if we eat certain foods separate, one after another, that would be better for digestion.
Okay. If our remote ancestors living in the caves or swinging it down out of the trees had to separate their carbohydrates from their proteins, I don't think we'd all be here. Having said that, that applies to people who have a robust digestion, whose digestion is working real well, and hopefully our remote ancestors had a pretty good digestion. After all, they weren't faced with FDA. So that'll ruin your digestion. Ever tell you about the FDA diet plan? Well, that's started when you're just sort of standing around your place of business and somebody kicks in the door and shoves a gun in your face, and I lost 14 pounds on that FDA diet plan. Actually, I lost 9 pounds the first week, and my wife said, gee, you need to lose 10